Hello and welcome. This is Zero Limits Living. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. Every week I bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. This week is not only no different, it's going to be better than any of the episodes we've done before. I've got a special guest, I have a special program, and I'm going to elevate our consciousness with his help today. Now, before we go too far, I want to congratulate everybody and thank everybody for helping. The show is brand new, very young, but right now you can see or hear it on over 1,000 different platforms. Probably any platform you could name, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, the Lux Media app. And I put up a website at ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com where I'm putting all of the episodes for the ease of finding them, ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. And you can sign up there to be notified every time there's a new episode. The next thing is people often ask about coaching. I developed a coaching program almost 20 years ago. It's been tested, it's been proven, and you can go to miraclescoaching.com to check it out. You can also have a free session there where you can find out if this is actually going to work for you or be right for you. So go to miraclescoaching.com. And now, I want to point out that I don't get paid to do this show. My guest doesn't get paid to do this show. And most likely you don't pay to access this show. Yet what we're giving you is priceless. It's gold. It is life-changing. It is life-transforming. I'm doing this to help you. My guest is doing this to help you. What we ask is that you be present, you pay attention, take notes where it's fitting, and then take action. Do all of that, and then, as I like to say, you can expect miracles. All right, who's our guest? Let me tell you. Hale Dwoskin. Hale has dedicated more than 4 decades to teaching and sharing the Sedona method, which helps people alleviate their suffering, actualize their goals, and discover the truth of who they are. Hale is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Sedona Method, this book right here, The Sedona Method. You're going to want to go get it. And he's the co-author of Happiness is Free and It's Easier Than You Think with Lester Levinson. He is one of the featured teachers in the book and movie The Secret, as well as a featured teacher in Rhonda Byrne's latest book, The Greatest Secret. He is also featured in the movie Letting Go. Hale is the director of training, lead teacher, and spokesperson for Sedona Training Associates, an organization created to promote the emotional releasing techniques inspired by his friend, mentor, and original teacher, Lester Levinson. He is also a founding member of the Transformational Leadership Council, and he has a website up with information. We're going to give that to you. I'll just say it right now. We'll spell it out later. Sedona.com/0limits. Sedona.com/0limits. But for now, Hale, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Great to see you and your smiling face.
Likewise.
What have you been up to today?
Working on irrigation we put in some trees in our yard. So we
got to have flow.
Yeah, definitely. We live in the northwest, so you don't really need much irrigation, but during the summer you do, especially with new plantings. So I'm working on that.
I like that. And I see you have a picture of Lester Levinson behind you.
I do.
Wow. So let's go back to the beginning. You know, you and I are friends, but I don't actually know your whole story, and maybe the people here don't either. So how did you, first of all, get involved in self-help and personal development? Even before Lester, what was propelling you to look into it, and what did you look into?
Well, I as a teenager, I felt really interested in transformation and truth. And it wasn't so much I was suffering because I was a teenager. I mean, I had the usual angst of being a teenager, but besides that, it wasn't so much trauma I wanted to get rid of, but I really wanted to go beyond the limits of what I knew was possible, both internally and externally. So I started seeking, and I did many, many things from both the East and the West. And then in 1976, and this started as a teenager, but then in 1976, at age 22, I met Lester Levinson. And he was the first living embodiment of a teacher I'd met who you could tell had stopped seeking. He no longer was on the quest. And he told an amazing story, which really hit me. He talked about how back in 1952, at age 42, he was sent home to die from a second coronary. And rather than give up, he being a physicist engineer, he went back to the lab within himself and he started a process of self-inquiry. And he discovered this set of tools, or the beginnings of this set of tools that we now call the Sedona method. And he used it intensively on himself over a 3-month period. And he went from a physical and emotional basket case, literally. The second coronary is just the tip of the iceberg, to this sense of oneness, a sense of openness, a sense of peace that he lived in for another 42 years after the doctors just gave him weeks to live. And when I heard that, it sounded impressive. And it wasn't just the story, though. I could feel, being with him, that there was something really different about him. And I decided if what he did could give me just a little taste of what he was a living embodiment of, I had to have it. And so I did what was then a 2-weekend course the very next weekend. And before the course was over, there was this deep inner recognition that this was my life's work. And I've dedicated my life to it ever since. It's been over 4 decades.
That's amazing. Over 4 decades. I think I came across the Sedona method in the 1990s, and I don't know if I had bought your tape set or something. I know I had Lester Levinson's books, the original books that he had written.
Yes.
And I was fascinated with the story, and I kept wondering how he did it, how he totally let go.
Yes.
And do you have insight into that, since you knew him for so long?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking, Hale, is that a lot of people have had heart attacks. A lot of people have done self-inquiry. A lot of people are on the spiritual search. A lot of people have been pushed into the ground, turned themselves over to whatever they thought they were turning themselves over to, and were no wiser afterwards.
Right.
What clicked? What shifted? Why Lester?
Well, again, why is a tricky question. Who knows?
Right.
Sometimes people will hear something from you or I in one of our seminars, and that's all they need to hear, and everything changes dramatically. The first time hearing about it. Yeah. And other people will go to every seminar we've ever done, and go from teacher to teacher to teacher, or spend decades with really advanced teachers, and their progress is minimal. And whether or not they apply themselves. So it's really hard to say. But what was unique about Lester is he had a strong determination to find the truth. And he realized, too, that it wasn't external, because he had already studied actually medicine, physics, engineering, and he actually studied everything except self-improvement and spirituality. So he realized it wasn't external. It had to be something internal. And so he looked inside, and he did use self-inquiry, but he started with questions like, in addition to the standard question of who am I, he also wanted to know what this world was, what's my relationship to it, and what is happiness? And he started, because of the intensity of the situation, he started to get answers. And these answers over the years have it liberated him in 3 months. But over the years, they've evolved into what we now call the Sedona method. When he passed his copyrights to me in the early 90s, there was just one way of letting go. And now we teach 5 ways of letting go. Uh-huh. And when we first started talking about letting go, the only ones who were really talking about it extensively was the 12-step community. It hadn't really caught on. Now everybody talks about the importance of letting go.
Well, there's a little bit of an irony in there that I'm sure you're aware of, but I'm going to point it out. You said he had a very intense desire.
Right.
And he was focused, almost on a type A, driven to find out the secrets of the universe, if you will. Yes. And yet the irony of it all is he had to let go.
Yes, that is an irony, isn't it?
Yes. And so it kind of boggles my mind, which is trying to understand all of this.
Of course.
How somebody that is driven to get an answer that is spiritually oriented, self-help oriented, personal improvement oriented, and yet the answer is really let go of the drive itself.
Exactly. Well, what happened is the first releases, it wasn't a technique. It happened spontaneously. His conscious mind dropped away. And then the place where all answers arise from revealed itself to itself. And then, being the nature of who he was, he just kept seeing how far he could go with it. He kept exploring and exploring and exploring and letting go and letting go and letting go. And pretty soon he made a 180 turn. When he first started doing this, if he couldn't prove it physically, it was BS. You didn't want to hear about it. At the end, he realized that the physical was the least of us. There was so much more to what is than just our physical or our lives. And he also discovered that we have, he didn't use the word zero limits, but I'm going to use that just because it's dear to you.
Good. Thank you.
He discovered that he had zero limits, literally and figuratively, not just in what he could do in the world, but that everything was boundless. There, when you see a glass, we see a glass. We don't realize that even that is just boundlessness. The books behind you are boundlessness. The chair you're sitting on is boundlessness. And so is what we consider ourselves. And the only reason we don't experience it directly is we've identified as this contraction within the physical body called me or I. And to the degree we identify with that, we suffer, but we're cutting off from that. Well, can't really cut off from it because that's all there is. But to the degree there is identification with that sense of me, to that degree, it isn't obvious. And as that sense of identification drops away, it becomes more and more obvious, finally, to no one. Because the absence of me, which is already the case, leaves behind what already is, that boundlessness or infinity or zero limits.
I love it. Would you say Lester was what we would call enlightened?
He didn't like that term. He said, as many teachers do, that if there's still someone if there's anyone there who thinks they're enlightened, they're not.
That makes a lot of sense.
So he never claimed to be anything in particular. He really didn't. And that's one of the things I liked about him. He was very unassuming, very direct.
Did you find that he was still capable of, this is going to sound weird, but it's a genuine question, of being a businessman and handling the business part? The reason I ask is that there have been numerous stories of people who have become awakened and then they more or less can't operate their business. Yes. They've separated themselves from the material.
Yes.
And so I'm exploring.
That's very common, but it wasn't in the beginning. Lester Lester was active from the very beginning. One of the things he did is there was a all night long radio show that he somehow became the program director for. So he stayed up all night doing the program directing for that. And then all day he just had a normal life. And when he got tired, he just let go for a second. And then he wasn't tired anymore. And he just was busy around the clock. And then at a certain point, he realized, I really should start sleeping again. But he didn't need to for a while. And the other thing he did is he noticed that people into spirituality had this belief that you had to abandon the world. You had that there was this imaginary boundary between what's spiritual and everything else. And he realized it wasn't true. So in order to prove that, began being a physicist engineer, he always had to prove everything out for himself. And he always recommended we do the same thing. Don't believe a word he says, but to find our own truth. So one of the other things he did is he bought and sold buildings in Manhattan and the Bronx. And
wow.
this is within just a year or two after he got his understanding. And he was very, very successful at it. But when he was done with it, he bought a trailer. He realized he was done with that. It was time to do something else. He bought a trailer and gave it all away because he knew he could create anything he wanted. So why hold on to it? And then he started traveling. And he was actually on his way to California. He drove into Sedona, Arizona, and an inner voice said, "This is your new home," but he was also still stubborn. He still had that tendency of stubbornness. I'm going to California. So he kept going and he got all the way to California, right to the city he thought he was going to. And the voice was still saying, "You need to go back to Sedona." I said, "All right, I'll go back to Sedona." And then when he, actually the first time he just drove by it on I-40, he never went down the valley into Sedona. So he went all the way back, drove into Sedona, and realized that he could feel why he needed to be there. And he was there for a while.
And is that where the name came from, that you call it the Sedona method after that?
The name actually came from, when it was first started, it was called first the way and then mind freedom. And mind freedom is actually a good description. It frees the mind. Mm-hmm. But you're old enough to remember, and I don't know if everyone listening to this will be, the Jonestown Massacre. When that happened, we decided that, mind freedom might be misunderstood. It's the exact opposite of brainwashing. Brainwashing is actually over-programming the mind, and giving your power away to some charismatic individual. Whereas letting go is the exact opposite. The more you let go, the less you're controllable. The less limited you are, the less lost you are in your programming. So, anyway, so at the time, Sedona still hadn't been discovered. When he went there in the 50s, it was totally undiscovered. He actually bought a bunch of land there.
Oh, smart move.
Right. He is always a good businessman. And he had parked his mobile home there, built a little home, lived there for a long time. And then he got this sense he needed to reach out and help people more. And he started going to New York and LA, teaching very small groups about what he had discovered. And that was before it was a formalized system. It didn't turn into a formalized system until in the early 1970s.
Oh, wow. Wow, I didn't know all of that. And I wanted to point out a couple of things and thank you. I wanted to thank you for pointing out that a lot of people fall for the belief that they can't be material, or they can't be successful, or they can't enjoy life, or they can't have money if they go in a spiritual direction.
Right.
And so, as I just used the word belief, it's a limitation. It is a belief. It is not a fact. It's not true. And it's good to hear that Lester was beyond that and didn't fall for it. I also wanted to point out, I've been rereading the book, and you have one chapter in there on the wealth builder.
Right.
So you're actually even talking about getting rid of some of the things that would get in our way. Right. So I have so many juicy questions for you.
Go for it. Go for it. Hey, I just wanted to mention one other thing before you get into those questions. Mm-hmm. Part of where the movie that both you and I came from, the reason that Rhonda told me, the reason, part of the reason the whole book, she was into it, and the whole book, is she read the Happiness is Free used to be called Keys to the Ultimate Freedom.
Yes, that's right. I have an early edition.
And she has that on her nightstand, and has had that since it came out in the mid-90s. And Lester was an early proponent of change the way you think and feel, your world changes. And that was what inspired her to go in this direction.
Nice.
Or one of the things. I'm sure it wasn't the only thing, but it's what inspired her to go into this direction.
Well, I'm glad that she did, for all of our sakes.
Yes, I know.
Right. Well, for the people that are watching and they're new to you, they're new to me, they're new to a lot of these concepts, how do you define the Sedona method? If you're stuck in an elevator, for example, what is your quick definition?
Sure. The very quick definition is, it's a simple yet very elegantly powerful technique that shows you how to let go of all inner limitation, whether it's a thought, a feeling, a belief, a story, a trauma, anything that seems to be holding you back in any way can be easily dissolved. And it's something, so that's the short summation.
Sure.
And it is based on the principle that feelings and thoughts and beliefs are just that. They're not the truth, and they're not who you are, and you can let them go.
You know, one of the things that always attracted me and at the same time confused me about the Sedona method, I mean, when I was first learning it, it was decades ago, so we didn't know each other. And it's the simplicity of it. I'm looking at your book, you know, and in the very beginning, and the Sedona method book is the one I'm referring to. And you have the basic releasing questions there.
Yes.
And if I just read the basic releasing questions to people, that's like, that's not going to do nothing.
That's right. That's really what people think.
They feel like it's too simple. But without me even saying what these questions are, I want you to defend them. I want you to tell me about wasn't there a Harvard study that was actually done?
There was. It was never published, so I stopped quoting it. But what happened is the Sedona method was compared to progressive relaxation and a control group, and the Sedona method outperformed the control group and progressive relaxation dramatically in producing a very profound state of relaxation within the body mind. And so the questions are as powerful as they are because they are simple. And they're based on a simple truth that you really have zero limits, none. And when you bump up against an apparent limit, it's not made of stone. It's not solid. It's not real. It's not as real as it seems. And you can let it go just by simply opening inside. And this is something that's very natural. Young children do this naturally. We all still do it naturally, even if we've done no other techniques for letting go. One of the times is when you have a really good belly laugh. That's why Norman Cousins laughed himself to health. And many people recommend that you try using humor to lighten your mood. And we do that naturally with our friends. We try to get them to lighten up by getting them to giggle a little bit. Well, that's one of the natural ways we release. Another one is when our back is against the wall, the shit is hitting the fan, and sometimes it gets so intense that for a second we slip and we let go. Those are the two ways that most people do it. But young children just do it. They don't, and it's not conscious. That's why they lose touch with it. It's completely automatic. The other reason they lose touch with it is they identify more and more as a separate individual. Young children are still in touch with their unlimitedness.
Yeah.
And even before that, before two, there is no sense of a separate individual. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the developmental process. But when it drops away as an adult, then there really are zero limits because there's no you to limit anything.
This is good. This is good. So can you help bring this home for people? Meaning if there's somebody watching, and lots of people watching, and they're suffering.
Yes.
They're suffering because, we're still going through a pandemic. There's a lot of confusion out there. I was in Russia and Ukraine, then I left, and Russia bombs Ukraine. And there's craziness that's going out there. And a lot of people have lost their job, resigned from their job, looking for a new job. A lot of confusion with interpersonal relationships, social media, people bicker and fight with each other. And so there could be a lot of people suffering. Where do they begin with the Sedona method now?
Why don't I actually explain the very beginning of the Sedona method and take people into the experience.
That would be awesome. In a way that Thank they can so keep much.
doing it on your own. Because again, I'd like people to come away from this with something they can use immediately.
Beautiful.
So let me just explain this a little more simply than I have so far. Everyone watching this or listening to this, pick up a pen or a pencil and hold it in your hand. And for the sake of this analogy, this object, and it could be a coin, a paperclip, it doesn't matter. But for the sake of this analogy, this object represents all limits. All inner and outer limitations, all anger, fear, frustration, negative thinking, negative beliefs, anything that's causing contraction. And your hand represents your gut or your awareness. Now, grip the object with your hand and now do it really tightly. Now, if we did this long enough, it would start to feel really uncomfortable, but also really familiar because this is what we're doing all the time without realizing it with our limitations. We're holding on to them. It feels like they're holding on to us, but that's not the case. But that's enough gripping. Now roll the object around in your hand. Now, is this object attached to your hand?
No.
Obviously not. But that's how it feels to us. It's even in our language with emotion, for instance. We don't usually say, I feel angry. We say, I'm angry. We don't usually say, I feel sad. We say, I'm sad. Because that's how it feels to us. We become the emotion, or we feel like there's no separation between the person we believe we are and the trauma or the belief. But everything like that is attached to us as this object is attached to our hands. So now take your hand, turn your hand upside down, and just let it go. That's what we're talking about when we say letting go. That's how easy it can be.
A simple release.
It's just a simple choice to just open and let go. And it's actually so natural that once we start to get in touch with it, it's like relearning something you've forgotten. And because it's so natural and so it can become so in second nature and effortless, you'll continue to do it more and more and more, maybe even just after this conversation. So this is usually what we lead with when people first learn about the Sedona method. These simple questions. It's a very small piece of it. And the other question, this is a general question, good for everyone. And then depending on other interests, we might lead with other questions. Or if you're really into spiritual exploration, there's a whole set of questions that go very deeply into recognizing non-duality. But let's stick with the simple first, because that's universally applicable no matter who you are or what you're into. So the questions are, what are you feeling? That's very simple. And then we invite you to just notice it or feel it or welcome it. And then the next question is, could you let it go? And could you just means, can you? And if you were able to drop that object, I know you can. The next question is, would you? And would you just means, are you willing to? And by the way, if you're trying to do this on your own and you're struggling, ask yourself, would I rather hold on to this suffering or this limitation? Or would I rather be happy and have my goals? And that's usually a simple choice. And then the last question is when, and when is an invitation to decide to do it now. And as you're doing this, you might find that you let go on could you, would you, and when, or you might save it all up. The only thing I recommend, because we're going to go through it together, is that you just keep an open mind and heart, and you avoid debate, but you're still honest with yourself. If the answer is no, then just say no to yourself. That's fine. And the only time we can struggle is if we overthink it and get into a whole debate about it. That's true in life too. When we overthink life, we're not living it anymore. Right. Well, the same thing is true with this way of exploring letting go. So let's just do it. Let's do it together. And Joe, you don't need to respond. I'm going to do this as a group process with everyone.
Okay. I will be a witness.
That sounds good. Well, you can participate too, but you don't need to. I'm not asking you the questions. I'm asking all of us the questions at the same time.
Thank you.
We're all doing it together.
Yeah.
So allow yourself to think of any situation, internal or external, that you're wanting to change or improve. And then notice what is felt inside. And could you just simply welcome it or allow it or be present with it? And then as best you can, just for now, could you let it go? Just could you? Would you? When? So we'll run through that a couple more times. But before I do that, you may have noticed a small shift or a big shift, but just know that you've had a whole lifetime of practice avoiding or suppressing your feelings or expressing them. And this is something new that may not click immediately, but just be persistent with it. You'll start to feel the results. So let's do that again. Focus on that same thing or anything else in your life that you're wanting to change or improve. And then just notice how you feel inside. If you pick the same thing, it may already be lighter. And then could you just simply welcome or allow or be present with whatever is being perceived or felt about it? And then as best you can, just for now, could you let it go? Just could you? Would you? When? So that is the very beginning steps of the Sedona method. And just with that much, a mutual friend of ours, Jack Canfield, invited me numerous times to speak at his Breakthrough to Success seminar. And I didn't teach more than just that one question. And I gave people background. And then I started working with people and we were discussing it. We had one woman who came up on stage who had cerebral palsy and could hardly walk. And we danced together. I've had people with severe fears and phobias, and all sorts of other emotional trauma, including the type of trauma that everyone's going through in the world right now. And just using that one set of questions, have it either lessen dramatically or disappear completely. I've had people who have been stuck financially, sometimes for a very long period of time, just through letting go of their feelings about it. All of a sudden, everything started to change. It wasn't like they were already doing all the right things but not producing the results they wanted to. But by getting themselves out of the way, things started to change dramatically. And I've had also people who have been either stuck in relationships that really weren't serving them or not being able to have the relationships that they wanted to have, let go and find that perfect someone or heal the relationship they were already in. And just from that one simple question, I've seen people break through wherever they were seen to be stuck on their spiritual path. Just all of a sudden it opens up and they start recognizing truth much more deeply and fully.
What it sounds like to me is that there seems to be an underlying current of clarity, wisdom, and truth that is there when we are out of the way.
Exactly.
Does that suggest that we don't have free will?
Well, no. Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So let me say what I mean by that. Both free will and predetermination, which is the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's two schools of thought. Some say it's all predestined and you have no control. And other people say you have no free will. But neither one is really true. There is just what's apparently happening. And that the free will and predetermination is referring to this person, the one that thinks they're limited. But that which actually is, that which already is boundlessness or already has zero limits, is beyond both free will and predetermination. It isn't the individual actor, but all action, all phenomena, the entire appearance we call life is that one universal, boundless energy that all is. And even the contracted sense of me is part of that as well. It's not separate from it. So free will or predetermination really aren't even important questions on a certain level. What's important is seeing through the sense of limitation and at the same time, if you're feeling like a person, the most powerful thing you can do is to let go of the limitations that the person appears to have. It instantly transforms your life.
So here's a different kind of a question. I hope you don't mind curveballs and sudden inspirations of curiosity that come from me. And it's the difference between struggle and suffering.
Yes.
Because a lot of what we want to get rid of is the suffering.
Yes.
But is struggle good, or can struggle be good?
Well, again, it depends on, we're using words. The thing about words is language is just simple symbols representing concepts about what was. So especially when you get more into the more expanded perspective, it's really hard to describe in words. In fact, it's probably impossible to fully describe it. We can point, but even our pointers aren't necessarily that accurate. So in my experience, challenges in life are natural. I mean, you have to, even if you never left your house, there'd be challenges in that. Probably big ones. Like actually, we've all had a recent example of that. When there was a lockdown, the challenges didn't go away. Most of them got got exaggerated,
Right.
because all our normal way of dealing with, or many of our normal way of dealing things got taken away from us. And we didn't realize how attached we were to certain things that we just took for granted. Well, so challenges in life are natural, but the sense of struggle and the sense of suffering, those are optional. But again, I might be defining it differently than you are, but that's the way I see it. Challenges are just the naturally arise in life. Life is exactly the way it is, and it may not always fit the picture that of what we've had in mind, but that can be just simply a challenge to rise to, as opposed to something to struggle with.
So what I'm hearing there is, if I am unhappy about the challenge, resisting the challenge, fearing the challenge in any way, wrestling with the challenge in some sort of non-positive way, then I probably should clear on it. I should do the Sedona method. So I'm at peace with the challenge. Challenge is still there, but my attitude will be better towards it.
Exactly.
Am I correct?
Yes. And so the advantage in that is severalfold. First off, if you clear on it, as you put it, your mind actually clears. And the part of you that has access to clear reason and intuitive knowingness, that shines through effortlessly the more you let go. And so it's not, and again, we touched on this in the beginning of our conversation. The beauty of the method is it's you use it in life where the rubber meets the road. In the middle of an argument, you can let go and the argument dissolves. In the middle of skidding out of control with a car, you instead of panicking, you remember, oh, I need to turn into the skid. In the middle of deciding whether to trade a stock or not, you can let go of the fear and the greed, and then there's clarity already. And so the more you let go, the more you become a natural vehicle for effortless manifestation. But also, as you keep letting go, what also lets go is the sense of a separate you. Then there's just, everything is just unfolding as it is. There is just what's apparently happening. And it no longer feels like it's happening to you. One of the reasons we're unhappy and we suffer is we make everything all about us. It's all me, 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 me. Or you, because when you think there's a me here, you think there's a you there. And when they do something that you don't like, you think they are doing it to you. But if that's all just that one energy naturally manifesting as it is, then both the sense of a separate me and a separate you can disappear. And then there's just effortless grace. I
love this. Love. You're sharing so much wisdom, and I really appreciate you walk people through the technique itself. I want to remind people that I'm reading the Sedona method, and I encourage you to get the book. The basic questions are in there, but there's also some real depth in here. Not that the questions aren't deep, but there's real depth in here and insight. And one of them I wrote down because I wanted to really explore this with you, at least for a couple of minutes, because one of the technicians just said we're running out of time. We got 10 or 15 minutes, but we got some time it's got to run out. One of the things you say in the book, feelings only lie.
Yes.
Feelings only lie.
Yes.
And I reread that 2 or 3 times going, what? Feelings only lie? Because there's a whole school out there that's talking about, listen to your feelings, follow your feelings. Feelings never lie. That's the other school.
I understand that. But that's only part of the sentence. Yeah.
Well, explain it to me.
First off, the whole quote, and it sometimes it will stop the mind because it doesn't click immediately. The feelings only lie. They tell you you're going to get from letting go of them what you already have from holding on to them. So, for instance, if you think you're really angry at someone, you think that that's going to prevent them from doing the same thing again. but everyone knows someone that they're angry with, and they keep doing the same thing to them over and over again, and they just get angrier, and it just spins out of control. There are situations where we're really fearful. We're afraid something terrible is going to happen. And in that fear, we're holding in mind that very same thing. And the fear is telling you that terrible thing is going to happen if you let go, but it's already happening with you holding on to it. And so, and the reason that there's confusion between schools is it's twofold. One is most people can't tell the difference between what's a feeling and what's intuition, because intuition can have a feel to it, very much so. But when you're not sure, if you just simply let go, you can tell the difference, because if it's intuition, it just it gets quieter and clearer. If it's just a feeling, it's gone. And then the other thing is that if it feels like your feeling, if it feels personal to you, then it comes with a whole story, and you're not seeing at all what's going on. You're seeing your story about it, your beliefs about it, your ideas about it, everything else. It's become like a filter, as opposed to an indicator. But as you recognize that you're not the feeling, but you're also not the person even with the feeling, it's just energy in motion, energy in motion, then the desire to manipulate with it, or the desire to manipulate the feeling itself, starts to drop away. And then everything is guiding you in the right direction. It could be a signpost. It could be a commercial on television. It could be something your friend just told you. And sometimes your feelings will be screaming no, but it is the right thing for you. So that's why it's important to let them go, because someone might be telling you something that if you did it, it would be really good for you. But because they remind you of someone who messed with you in the past, because they look like them, you're like this. You have blinders on. You reject them. You don't want to hear them. You're going like this. You're not willing to listen because of just some emotion. When the emotion is released, then there's clear seeing.
That is great insight.
Yeah. So, and actually there's always clear seeing. It's just when the emotion is strong enough, it shuts down our ability to clearly see what actually is.
Years ago, we were going to a TLC meeting, the Transformational Leadership Council, and you were checking in. And I saw you there, and I don't remember how I asked it, but I was glad to see you. You had a big smile on your face. You were glad to see me. And I asked you about your trip, and you said you had driven there. And it seemed like it was a long drive from wherever you were to there. And so I'm always curious, when people go on a long drive, what are you doing? Do you talk to somebody? You make phone calls? Do you listen? Do you meditate? What are you doing? So I asked you, and you said, I've been doing the Sedona method. Right. And I thought, you've been doing it for 12 hours in the car, on the road, after been doing it for 4 decades?
Yes.
When do you ever stop?
Well,
and so that's really my question is.
Yeah, so there's 2 things about that. Yeah. One is, the more you do it, the more it just feels like going into bliss. You just feel the sense. You're no longer, the questions that we went over earlier are just the first baby steps to kind of get you used to it. Young children who already do this naturally, they don't use questions. They're just in the flow. So I've been in decades in this almost perpetual state of flow, and anything that arises just dissolves. So it's like it's like living life wide open.
I see.
So nothing sticks. Yeah. So it's not like hammering at it. It's just this sense of openness that allows for all sense of limitation to dissolve by itself. And the other thing that's happened is, even now, there's not even the sense of that. There is just what is. There's not that even this, there's almost no sense of a separate individual who's in the flow. There is just the flowing, unlimited life itself.
So who's taking the action?
No one. Action is just simply happening.
Is this why you have an assistant to book your interviews, like with me? And you didn't do it.
Yes, but I still, I'm went to 2-3 stores today to get stuff for the drip system, but the fact that I had to go to 3 stores was just what happened.
Yeah, gotcha.
Each store had certain things that were needed, and then I had to go to another store to get the next thing.
So where did the desire come from? You even said the irrigation system isn't actually even necessary where you're at. Well, but you got a desire.
Well, what happens with all life is already spontaneous, including desires, including thoughts, including feelings. There's already not someone who's operating life. Like seeing right now is happening. You don't have to effort to see, but it feels that way. You feel like I'm seeing. Hearing is just simply happening. But the way it feels is I'm hearing. We don't realize that sense of me doing it in and of itself is a huge filter from just pure hearing.
Oh, that's
We're
good.
seeing.
That's a very good insight.
Pure perceiving is just happening. It's not something that requires a you or requires any effort.
I'm gonna sneak in a couple questions under the wire here.
Sure.
One of them, I like to ask this because I'm curious. What were you hoping I would ask you in this interview? Did you have a question stuck in your pocket?
No, not at all. Fortunately, I on my phone, I have a scheduling, and I'm going to talk to my friend Joe. Great. So my expectations going into this were zero.
Good.
I've done, as you probably know, I've done so many interviews over my career, and it's been decades since. Now, often they ask for questions. If they ask, I'll give them something. But do I care if they do? No. I actually prefer it when it's just a spontaneous happening.
Me too.
Because whatever comes out is what's appropriate in the conversation. Then that's perfect.
Yeah. Now, I do have a website I'm giving out for people. Of course, I want them to go get your book and your other books, but the Sedona method right there, I got that off of Amazon. Your website is sedona.com/zero limits. So www.sedona, sedona.com/0, spelled out ZERO limits. Sedona.com/zero limits. What are your last words? What would you like to say to people as a takeaway, as a thought, as a quote, as a stimulation, inspiration?
Sure. So just a couple of takeaways. First off is just remember that all the limitations you believe you have are just beliefs. It's not the truth. And you can let them go. There really already are zero limits. The other thing is, be open at least to the possibility that anything that appears to be holding you back is just an appearance. It's not the truth. And if you stay open to, and also right now, right here, there is already unlimitedness. There is already unconditional love. There is already boundless energy, boundless beingness. And that is what is already. And you don't need to do anything to accomplish that. That's what is. And just being open to that, it starts to reveal itself to itself.
That is absolutely beautiful. Hale, I can't thank you enough. You have touched my heart. You have helped everybody that is listening and watching. I've been talking to Hale Dwoskin. He's the author of the Sedona Method. Go get his book. He has a website, sedona.com/zero limits. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. This is Zero Limits Living. Every week to bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. You can now watch or hear this show on 1,000 different platforms, including Roku, Amazon TV, Apple, and so forth. Go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. You can see all the episodes right there. If you're interested in coaching, go to miraclescoaching.com. Get a free session, miraclescoaching.com. I want to thank Lux Media Studios, Candace Barr, Chris, who's running the camera, you for watching. Tell all of your friends about this. If you're seeing this on YouTube, leave some nice likes and comments and pass the word. And as I like to say, expect miracles.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radical, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.